This is the Spinner Rack.
Welcome right back to Spinner Rack, the new comic book code authority. Today I'm with Cal and Petey. We're going to be discussing this new controversy we're hearing that Disney may actually shut down Marvel Comics.
No, it was a rumor that was been expunged and said it was totally wrong. Okay. But it went like wildfire through the comic thing, and because the sales are so down.
And this is not the first time this has happened. This happens like once a decade that they're going to do this. It's either Marvel or DC.
They almost did in the 90s.
They almost did. I think they had something like, well, DC had their scare in the 70s. I think Marvel had, and then
Marvel was almost, helped them towards that.
Yeah, because they were like, oh yeah, we'll publish them for you in the 80s. Then Marvel has their whole thing. Marvel has their thing in the 90s when they're bankrupt, and they're like, these comics aren't working. Everybody was saying they're just making the comics so the toys and this, that, and the other. Yeah. So, as much as people want to slate comic books, the comic books do make money. Okay, and they are also a very viable breeding ground for all these other ideas that tend to be able to, the gestation of a whole bunch of ideas, and they love that breeding ground for them, so they don't want to give that up, and they are profitable.
Well, the hard part of it, the hard part of the Marvel part in it, because they produce the number of comics they do, and within the month they do half of it is like reprint covers, and then they have reprints. So it's like,
but that's
how
Marvel.
much new? Like no, that's once you start doing a lot of reprints. That's going into the Charlton area where they went to almost all reprints. So these dollar reprints keep going away, and they start selling more. Marvel start looking at it and saying maybe we could cancel, but they also have these things where it's like duplicate comics. There's a lot of flooding the market. Which is a problem
exactly that. They've been doing that since they've been flooding the market since the 1970s.
Yeah.
What would you have? You would have Fantastic Four, and then the Fantastic Four reprint, World's Greatest Hero. Mm-hmm. You would have Spider-Man, Marvel Tales. You would have Daredevil, Amazing Adventures, Amazing Adventures X-Men. But all their top comics also had a reprint comic that came out the same month, and then all of that is shelf space. We got to put all this up over here. And DC was doing the same thing, only that they consolidated everything into the 100-pager. You got a new story, three or four reprinted stories, and it was like buyers are kind of like, that was the better buy.
Yes.
That was the better buy, and guys are like, nah, I don't want that. I'm gonna buy two of everything over here.
But it's a different strategy, because when we're talking about market share. When you have the ability to put out so many comics, whether they're variants and copies or reprints, now you're taking up so much shelf of a retailer. That pushes back the independents. That gives them less opportunity. And I think that's part of Marvel's strategy. Hey, we're the big dog. We're 40%.
Yeah, they learned that from DC.
We're 40%, we're 50%, we're 40% of the market, but yet, and we can push you out, even if we're not printing new stuff. And this is what Marvel has to look at. They're like, hey, man, we're making like...
It's also the buyers. The guys buy this stuff.
Right, and we're making 30-40% of our money from reprints, from trade paperbacks. And so why do we need to come out and spend on talent? Why do we need to fight for a Didio? Why do we need to fight for a Bendis? Why do we need to fight for a Wade when we can automatically just live off our laurels? And
because you can't. Most of these guys are buying that reprinted material because you can't get the original is so expensive now they can't afford it. But some of the stuff I'm seeing reprinted, I'm like, look, that's not too much of an expensive book. Like they reprinted the first appearance of Binary. What was that, Avengers 1? Uncanny X-Men 167. That's not too expensive of a book to get, but they get it as $1, and they're hoping that this is going to somehow appreciate in value.
You think reprints? They're hoping reprints will appreciate?
Yeah, some reprints are quite, have a good dollar number behind, like Marvel Tales, the Spider-Man run. You get the right issue on that. That's a $30, $40 book if you have it, because again, this was something that reprinted a book that most guys can't get their hands on now. And it may be, let's say, the first appearance of the Punisher is Amazing Spider-Man 129. He's reprinted in Marvel Tales. But then there was another reprint after that. So now you have the original, you have the first reprint, second reprint, which is the rarest of them. And so for the bigger collectors, the guys are like, okay, they want to have that. Or if you get all the Marvel Tales together, you're a big Spider-Man fan, and you're kind of like, well, look, I can't afford the originals. I can't afford to spend, $500,000 on Amazing Fantasy, but I wouldn't mind having a complete run of all the stories and reading them in Marvel Tales. So you can do, that along. The reprints do work to a certain extent, but the stuff that even Marvel's reprinting right now is still affordable. Yeah. It's still affordable where you could go and get it. Infinity Gauntlet is not this extravagantly expensive book, that you couldn't go and pick it up if you wanted to, or first appearance of Binary, or even some of the Conan material that they've reprinted. Those things are not that far out of reach. So,
but the question is though whether or not that does Marvel need to print new stuff? I mean, if you have all this old stuff, all
that's
this,
the issue.
and this is what I'm saying that they can do. The talent costs money. The printing.
Okay,
Stuff.
but
They answered that-
you're getting too
they answered
happy
that
about
question.
getting rid of the talent.
Who says I'm happy?
You were
I'm just
getting
saying,
you getting
I'm
a little
not-
excited.
They answered that question. That question was
I'm
answered
looking-
back in the 1970s because they were already doing the reprints. And the reprints, this is different now
Wow.
because they were doing reprints. The reprints cost as much as the regular comic. Now the reprint is $1 and the regular comic is $4.
Right.
So you've got more of an impetus to say, okay, no, we can cut costs, do more of this reprinted material over here. But even at that point there, when it was equal, they were still like, no, we still need to have. We still need to have something new so we can eventually reprint that. We may cut back on it,
But
but
you're having what's happening now. You have the TV shows and the movies where people can come back to the comics, the old comics, and see like Infinity War, and see some of these old comics where these things originally came, the original source material. I agree that they need to have people doing this original, but you have to look if Marvel's looking at cold hard numbers. The comic book market is just not exploding in terms of profits. You're not making a lot of money.
That's where they could decide to, but like comic book history as far as reprints, the only problem in the 80s, the reprint became like a dirty word
yeah.
to collectors, and that sort of killed that market. But
Like,
it
oh,
was very strong.
this isn't real.
Yeah, so you were seeing books that you hadn't read, but the problem was when you were like going into I have the special edition Nick Fury, and they're like, that's not worth anything. Get out of here. And that would hurt, and it hurt the whole thing because when you go to the stores. But the thing is that it's only a rumor. We got, we have some time, but you always have to worry because the sales are not what they were, and it's a hard thing to know if the person buying the variants is buying, this sold 20,000 copies. Are they buying 5 versions or all the variants?
And they're not counting the digital sale. They're not counting digital sales either, and they don't release the numbers on that. Yeah. So again, I think to a certain extent, we're not getting full numbers because you have a series like Injustice: Gods Among Us, which I heard was selling, like doing gangbuster numbers in terms because it was released digitally first, and it was doing gangbuster numbers to the point it was only supposed to be a year like a certain amount of issues. Right. That book is still going on now because it sold so well for them. But again, the primary focus was digital, and no one to this day, no one knows what the numbers are on it. Just that it sold incredibly well, and nobody was expecting that.
So, but it's the question then, and I think I'm going to bring this up to you because this all relates to is the talent. What you were saying something about Didio. Can you emphasize that?
When they had this conference, the word got back to the fans and the other pros with that. Didio said in the conference that it's not a problem of publishing books. It's a problem of finding the talent to fill those books, understand? Because we publish the same
lies,
numbers.
damn lies, and even bigger damn lies.
Because there's still talent that's still able-bodied talent that have been...
Yeah, able-bodied and... go ahead, finish. I'm sorry.
But I'm saying able-bodied talent that could still do books, could write books. He's talking about hot talent.
Yeah.
That immediately bring you those big numbers.
Which is also the expensive talent.
Yes.
And I think we did this the last time we got together. DC already found a way where they're like, hey, look, we can cut back on some of this stuff because they're cutting back to the comic store. Okay, they're cutting back to the comic store, but they're expanding in terms of the other retail stores like Walmart, JCPenney, Target. They're doing good numbers over there. When they first started, they did the 100-pager, which was always a good idea for them. They started with the 80-page giant, 100-page giant. They got 20 extra pages. But that was for a kid, that's great. They're like, oh, this is going to take me forever to read this. And you read it over and over again. But they started with just Walmart, and it was Superman, Batman, Teen Titans, Justice League of America. Those books sold well enough over there, and not just the guys say like me, okay, I want to get a couple copies for myself, and then maybe I'll sell one so I can eat up the cost of what I spent on that first one. No, these sold well enough that they expanded. They said, okay, why don't we do one for Swamp Thing? Okay, let's do one. We're going to do Wonder Woman now, and the Flash, and Titans. Okay, so they've expanded that line. And then the other thing is, look at the cost for it. One of those books is $5. One of those books is $5 and 100 pages compared to one of the new books coming off the rack. And how much is that? $5. The other thing is, I was looking through it. I was reading the original story, and then I'm going through the rest of it. And I was like, no, I remember these were good stories. These are perfect stories to get people interested in reading more. But I don't know if that leads them to buy more new regular comics or trades. It's hard to tell where they go at the end of the day.
Well, I just want to add to what you said is that goes into, again, DC having another reprint market and giving, like, moving, if it's a viable market and they're doing like maybe it's like 8-page stories or 10-page stories.
12-page stories.
Of new, but then it's like has the old material.
88 pages.
And it feeds into another reprint culture that.
No ads.
Oh, gosh.
No ads.
So once you go to this period where you're like Charlton Comics, where it was at the end of the road and they were still reprinting stuff they had 1 through 6. And what was it? Doomsday Plus 1. They did 1 through 6, and then 6 through 12, 7 through 12 are all reprints of what they just printed. So that's one of the things, the fear of once you start to say, oh, I'm not going to do this, and they get a whole bunch of they can start reprinting books, and that's the fear of them deciding, you know what, we have years of story. And then also DC's weird with their trades, because they do the most successful books and they do the Vertigo stuff that doesn't sell that well, and the stuff in the middle is just like, what do we like? You know, we like Simonson, Simonson, let's give us a Orion, but that didn't sell as well as some of the other new guys.
So what do we like? Is it Simonson yet? Does it have a bat on it? Nah, forget it. We're not doing it.
But I think the key thing here is they're saying there aren't enough people who can do content. Like you said, people who can. But I remember the same argument being made on TV recently, where they're saying there's over 300 scripted shows coming out, and there's just too much good shows for people to watch. That's a bunch of crap.
How does that?
It correlates with Dan Didio saying that they don't have enough talent, basically, to do this. And the same thing that they're saying with TV shows, there's just not enough talent. There's too many people in the shows.
I think we have to read into what he's saying a bit. And what he is saying, there's not enough talent to do. There's not enough inexpensive talent to do this.
But
do you know what these guys are? Do you know the bigger guys are? The writing is not the problem. It's the art. Okay, and then it's what you got to pay these guys to. I mean, I think I already did my best to break it down with the 100 pagers, how they save money on that. If it's, put it like this, let's say you're someone like Gabriel Delato. This guy does covers. Okay, he doesn't do interiors, he does covers. This guy can command a lot of money for just the cover. So now we're talking, okay, how would you cut costs? You want Gabriel Delato, but how do you cut costs?
You don't have Gabriel. You get someone who draws similar to him.
But Gabriel Delato will sell any book that he does a cover for. So you need more you want talent, but you don't want to have to pay as much money as like a Gabriel Delato. So what do you have to do? You go back to what this almost gets back to the whole thing with the reprints, because they used to have like backup features in comics. Like if you were reading Superman, you would have had like, what was the backup feature? The Private Life of Clark Kent. Right. Okay, and in the Private Life of Clark Kent, you could throw somebody new there, like a new writer, new artist. Yeah. Okay, we're going to train you right over here. You got 6 pages. This is what needs to happen in the story. Make it happen. And this guys could come over there. And then as they got better, they got promoted to they got promoted to like the full issue writer or full artist or this, that, and the other. And even the idea of like guys who just did covers was almost unknown and unheard of. Some people may have, like Neil Adams would have only done covers for Superman, but that was because Kurt Swan was the Superman artist. Nobody was bumping him off of Superman at that time. He was too synonymous, and DC wanted that look preserved.